Hello and welcome to the B2B Trust and Influence podcast with your host, Joel Harrison. It's great to have you back here for another session talking about all the issues relating to trust and thought leadership and influencer activity in B2B, which is a deep topic and lots of stuff to explore. So my guest for today's episode is Vito Labate, who is VP of Global Industry Marketing at Cap Gemini. If you're not aware of Cap Gemini, well, you might say, where have you been? But they are a $23 billion global tech consulting firm working with some of the world's biggest companies. As such, thought leadership is a critical part of their marketing effort. And last November, they beat off stiff competition from other professional services firms to win gold in the thought leadership category at the B2B Marketing Awards in London. And I was delighted to be there myself and enjoy the celebrations. Vito's based in Toronto and he's been with Capgemini for over 20 years, where he's risen through the ranks to witness the evolution of marketing firsthand. Vito, welcome.
Thank you so much, Joel. Glad to be here.
Well, it's lovely to have you taking the time to be involved. Let's just give a little bit more, build up that background to you. Your role is VP of Global Industry Marketing, based in Toronto. Tell us a bit about your role and remit. Who's your audience?
Absolutely. So I lead the global industry marketing team for the group at Capgemini, and basically we're responsible for overseeing the marketing strategy and the execution of our marketing programs for a number of our priority industries. And really, at the end of the day, I think with a lot of professional services firms, it's really about becoming, I'll say, the trusted partner of choice with our clients. And so, how do we do that, right? And much of the time on my team, we're spending our time driving thought leadership, trying to create client engagement, and helping grow the business and grow pipeline within our industry practice. And our audience, Joel, tends to be C-level, right? It's the C-suite business leaders who are looking for transformation in their business from a digital perspective, innovation. That tends to be our primary audience, in addition to all of the others that you would expect, like industry analysts and influencers. And of course, we work with many of the world's technology partners. So that's generally the scope of my responsibility at
Okay.
Capgemini.
Fantastic. Thank you. A lot going on there. Lots to focus on, lots to do. And kind of you talked about certain industries. I mean, there are particular ones you're focusing on. Technology sector is what well, you're doing consulting about technology, but I guess it can apply in lots of different situations.
Absolutely, and I think that's what the beauty of the fun of the role is we have nine different industries at the global level that we're focused on. Anything from automotive, consumer products and retail, energy and utilities, and the list goes on, including public sector, life sciences. And so each of those industries obviously have very unique challenges for the clients that are in those industries. And my team, we have a team in each of those industries responsible for driving that marketing strategy and helping build some of the, not only the mind share, but also the market share for those industries.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that. So, my perspective looking at B2B marketing, particularly around the awards entries, for example, that we do every year, is that professional services firms have become much more committed to and focused on marketing in the last 5 to 10 years. Do you share that perspective? Is that something you see?
I think so. I think so. When I think back uh, over the last 10 years, for sure, the role of marketing has changed, especially in professional services firms. I think 10 years ago, you probably would have thought or seen a lot of marketing organizations almost perceived as a support function. And now I think a lot of teams, or certainly with us, we're seen as a strategic growth driver. We're responsible for bringing growth to the firm and helping the firm grow. Um, and I think if you would have thought back in that time frame, you would have also seen a lot of more event-heavy marketing, maybe a lot of focus on brand awareness versus, say, demand gen or business growth. But today, I think there's a lot more focus in the industry around the benefits that AI is bringing to the table. Think of analytics, right? If you want to run hyper-personalized campaigns today, you need to have that capability of analytics behind it and data-backed marketing strategies. So I think it has changed, and I would characterize it as a shift from not only just building brand awareness, which was a hallmark of marketing in the past, now to being a strategic part of how you grow your business.
Yeah, it's that full commercial engagement, I guess, which is helping position marketing really well. So that's great to see. It's nice to hear see the kind of reflections that I have validated by what people are saying in the market.
I
Um,
also I also think that it's around storytelling as well. Just not to interrupt, but just to also share. I mean, I think you see so much more focus on how we go to market in non-traditional ways, how we share stories either from our clients or from our employees themselves of what we can bring to the table. And I didn't see that 10 years ago.
Yeah, it feels like there's real confidence in the category and in professional services as a sector to embrace those really powerful, compelling means of doing marketing.
Absolutely.
But the one area that professional services did seem to be particularly kind of at the bleeding edge or lead, pardon the pun, above other categories in B2B was thought leadership. And it seems to be something which as a category done much more of. Is this something that Capgemini has used significantly during that period in more recent years?
You know, in our industry, it's all about credibility, right? And I talked about earlier storytelling. If you don't build credibility with an influence with the decision makers, it really you can't be successful in the professional services world. So I think if you think of say a product-driven industry, uh, you would be talking about features and functions, whereas in a professional services environment where we're selling services, the value that I think we're bringing is around our expertise, our insight, our ability to counsel our clients on how to navigate their transformational journeys within their own organizations. And I think that's where thought leadership comes in, right? Because that trust and expertise is almost like our currency. They want to engage with us because they believe in our knowledge and our ability to kind of drive their goals. So I think there's a lot of credibility that we're investing in when we do thought leadership at Capgemini, because it's all research backed. It's not opinion. It's based on empirical research or surveys and studies versus just putting out an opinion in the market.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about that particular example over there. But as you say, you you have been doing this for a long time. I guess it's baked into your knowledge and activities as a marketing function, right? It's a core discipline now. Would that be a fair assumption?
Absolutely. In fact, we have a dedicated research team. They're called the Capgemini Research Institute, and they are responsible for our flagship research across all of those industries that I mentioned, and more than that. So we've really invested heavily in thought leadership and creating proprietary research that is aimed at the CXO community and C-level clients. Um, so that's I think our focus really is on how do we develop our strength in thought leadership and how do we bring that to a market in a way that is engaging for our clients.
Okay, and having that research function, I can imagine is really, really valuable. You've got all those skills in house already. And so last November, as I said, in London, Capgemini won gold in the thought leadership category at the B2B Marketing Awards for a campaign called Building Trust in Data Sharing. Tell us a bit about that campaign. What was it aimed at? Who are you targeting? What were you trying to achieve?
Oh my goodness, it was what a wonderful accolade and evening. So first of all, to your point, I just full credit to the Capgemini team that was responsible for that campaign and that win. There's a member of my team named Oliver Jones, who's the marketing director for Capgemini's global public sector practice, and also Melanie Dressel from our account-based marketing team. They collaborated with dozens of marketing and communications colleagues here at Capgemini to make the magic happen, if I can say, on that campaign. But that campaign, so we called it Building Trust and Data Sharing. It was really focused on the public sector, and it was designed to address a big challenge that we saw them facing. The challenge, Joel, was like, how do you help groups of organizations, whether it's hospitals, police, environmental protection agencies, how do you help them share data in a secure and compliant way that can help them make more informed decisions in their organization and ultimately deliver better public services to their constituents. And the challenge we had along the way was these were organizations across Europe. They spoke different languages. In some cases, we lacked the visibility to job titles, and so it was difficult to identify who some of our audience was. And with a lot of those, I'll say, public organizations, they're often working behind firewalls, and so it can be tough to reach them in the way that we normally would in other industries.
And so you and just to clarify, you're talking about the sharing data with each other, right? So you might have one. It's kind of like I don't know what the expression might be, mass data pooling, mass comparisons. You've got a public sector organization in one country doing one thing, and you're sharing data with another organization that might not be even doing exactly the same thing, but in another country or territory. I can appreciate there's lots of logistical challenges associated with that.
Exactly. And part of the approach that we took to overcome some of those challenges was, you know, to our earlier conversation as well, thought leadership. We needed to provide our target clients there with credible insights that they could so that we could back our own message. We used ad campaign techniques to be able to amplify some of those, some of the challenges and how Capgemini can help address that for our clients. And really the focus was, I'll say it was about 1,000 data leaders across different government organizations that were our focus for the campaign. Um, and at the end of the day, too, Joel, when you're working with those kinds of clients and audience, you want to build trust, right? I mean, we're talking about data. We all value data so much. Having some of that trust and building some of that trust was an important element of that campaign as well.
Absolutely. I guess, and you're trying to encourage them to share things which are commercially sensitive and legally sensitive as well. So there's
Absolutely.
a lot of you got to jump, got a hoops you got to get through there to get to that.
Absolutely. And I think that's why that was one of the campaigns that we felt strongest about when we nominated it or submitted it as a nomination for the B2B Marketing Awards, because we just felt like it was a perfect example of how you can bring together all the things that we've talked about: storytelling, thought leadership, a little bit of creativity and advertising, but also some technical prowess in terms of how do you reach a difficult audience. And honestly, we were so thrilled to be honored that evening. It was great.
Well, it was wonderful to see you go up there and winning it, and enjoying congratulating you afterwards. So, it was a great evening. It was a long evening, but I don't know
What
if
a
you.
thrill. Such a thrill, though. Such a thrill.
Well, it was lovely you guys could be there, and so congratulations again. And we talked earlier on a little bit about how, and you alluded to this earlier on, often in B2B marketing, there's a kind of tension between brand activity and demand activity. So activity that's invested in building the brand with a view to, commercial success somewhere down the line, with something that's more focused on demand or a bit more adding to pipeline, creating opportunities and more immediate revenue oriented activity. And thought leadership can be attributed to either side of those. Where did this campaign sit?
It was right in the middle. I think it served both purposes because thought leadership was such a major part of it. So it helped us build not only that trust and credibility you're talking about, the I'll say the mind share, but also led to some of the pipeline impact and market share. Um, I think first and foremost, like I said, we wanted to position ourselves as a thought leadership in this very sensitive area uh, of being trusted in data sharing. But we had to have some engagement pathways along the way. I call them engagement pathways that really led to business conversation and opportunities. So I think our positioning was really focused on speaking to the executive executive of our audience organizations, as well as kind of generating some interest amongst the analyst community, amongst the media, tier one media, and getting some of that analyst recognition. That all kind of contributed to the success of the campaign, but we had to do it in a balanced way. You had to build that market share and that mind share equally. And I think that's where thought leadership really played a big role for us.
Because it gives you a vehicle, I suppose, that can be translated into advertising. It can be translated into investor communications or PR or something like that. Am I correct there?
Absolutely. And we even actually used it. So with our advocates from our own business on their social media profiles, each of them have these incredible networks within those industries or within those communities, and they were able to amplify the message. And guess what happens? I mean, this is what happens on social. You post something that we find interesting based on maybe a piece of data or research, and all of a sudden it generates this discussion or this conversation with your network that maybe wouldn't have otherwise existed. So I think it's not only having the content that, say, thought leadership would put in their hands, like the data, but also being provocative in how we're going to market and how we're sharing it externally. And it wasn't, I got to say, it wasn't the hard sell, right? When we post something, when we ask our leaders to post something on their social networks, it's about provoking a conversation, not here's our product, buy our product. Because I think we're all much smarter now, right? We can very much spot if someone is not being transparent and just simply selling a corporate line. That's not what we're about. We're really trying to build this dialogue, I'll say, in the industry or in the public sector around the work that we can bring to the table and how clients can solve some of their challenges.
Yeah, it's so much of the dialogue, and I've been having a lot of conversations about thought leadership recently for obvious reasons. Seems to be around, it's that engaging people intellectually and addressing their problems. It's not about just trying to ram product or service down their throat. It's a much more intelligent way of communicating, I think, and that's what I really like about the topic. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Um, and just you've said that this campaign kind of straddled both of the demand and brand type activities. Is that typical for the thought leadership that CapGem does, or was this more unique in being a bit more holistic?
I think it's typical that we try to take a balanced approach with the thought leadership. We know that if we put out thought leadership that is very clearly a sales pitch or a sales vehicle, it is not going to resonate with our audiences. And so I think we learned a long time ago that, the research that we put out has to be empirical. It has to be third party, just to use real data from within the industries that we're working with. And I think our marketing programs then come in and say, okay, now that we have this data that lends some credibility to it, how can we use it to help spark a conversation? I think that is typical at Capgemini. That's really what we try to do with any thought leadership is use it as a vehicle to raise a conversation in the marketplace or forge a relationship or forge a conversation that we otherwise wouldn't have with our audiences.
And presumably, as well as it being spanning both those sides of the brand and demand thing, presumably it's also deployable when you have a fee earner or a salesperson who's actually engaged in a conversation with a client.
If you think about it, especially with campaigns that are international in nature, they each have to be, the content has to be localized for that country or for that region. Sometimes that means translation. Sometimes that means using testing to determine what kind of creative is going to resonate more culturally versus in another country. So I think there's a lot of considerations that go into it especially when you're driving these campaigns across several different countries around the world.
Okay. So we talked about the fact that you won this campaign, won this category at the awards against some very well-known, some other very well-known global competitors, people moving into thought leadership who might not actually know about them in that capacity. So this campaign had really had to stand out. And you said you looked at various activities that you're doing, you thought this was the one to enter in this area. So tell us, were there what particular aspects of what you did in this situation do you think was really stood out, or were you different or unique?
I would probably start by saying, first of all, that it was a unique and I mean, I'll call it timely topic, right? Data sharing itself, as you said earlier, it's a massive challenge and it's an opportunity for a lot of organizations. So I think the timing was right, first of all, in the beginning. Secondly, I think when it comes to thought leadership, as I've been saying, hard data and real insights with this flagship leadership research report that we put out, that really resonate, right? Because it brings us that unique, incredible, I dare say even differentiated viewpoint that Capgemini is bringing to market versus, say, some of our competitors. So I think that helped us set apart. And then thirdly, I'd probably call upon our activation plans, right? It was multi-channel, as I talked about earlier. It was localized for individual countries around Europe. And we even brought in some of our ABM capabilities, right? To bring the content and start the conversation on accounts where we had significant account-based marketing programs and where we wanted to engage the C-suite around topics that we knew that they were facing within their own business. So probably those three are the main areas that I think really helped us differentiate. But I have to say, at the end of the day, it also was about storytelling, right? And making sure that everything was tailored in a way that resonated with the client, but also spoke the language of their particular organization. And I think that's what made a big difference. And we're glad that we were able to stand out as a result.
And of course, you could also show some commercial results at the end of it as well. You had some kind of like we can show this has had an impact on the bottom line as well, which is great. So I was going to ask about account-based marketing because you mentioned that earlier on. You mentioned that one of the people, I forget her name, who was instrumental in
Melanie,
Melanie,
yes.
who was instrumental in making this happen, is from the ABM team. So, and I guess that these are the organizations you talked about targeting are their accounts in their own right. They're large organizations, they're complex organizations, and multiple stakeholders. So that was another means at which you this was kind of a facet at which you, as you say, it was the campaign was very successful because you were able to understand that buying group and target them.
Honestly, and this is maybe even the biggest piece of advice I would have for our listeners too is, your marketing program, let's say from an industry marketing perspective, in my example, it has to be married with your account-based marketing approach. Because if the two aren't operating in sync, you look disconnected and fragmented in the market. And I think we realized many years ago that account-based marketing is a key way that we can engage with our clients, and it feels much more customized and personalized. And so I know someone like Melanie and the rest of the team, they were working really hard to be able to take some of the thought leadership content that was the heart of this campaign around data sharing and be able to put it in front of our clients in a way that felt contextual for them, that felt like it was created specifically for them versus here's something that we've created and now we're just pushing it down all of our different accounts. We really wanted to create that customized, personalized experience, and I think it's probably one of the best examples of how we worked with account-based marketing for success.
Yeah, it feels like that customized, that personal approach is so powerful. It's definitely the way B2B marketing is going at that, that large end of the spectrum. I mean, I guess that we might have overlapped into the next question I'm going to ask you, which is there anything you've learned this year from the campaign that you do differently or double down on for next year? I mean, was the account-based thing something new, or was there something else perhaps that you might say, oh, well, we trialed this and it was great. We do a bit more of this next year.
It account-based marketing hasn't been new for us. You probably know Neil Barry was recently hired a couple of years ago here at Capgemini to lead account-based marketing, and he's been turning it around and turning it into the kind of account-based marketing team that we want to be able to have at Capgemini. I'll tell you what, Joel, I learned that how addictive it is to see a team win on stage at the awards, which is wonderful. No pressure, right, for next year, although I do feel that. Um, but here's what I think we took away. I think we learned that we need to really double down on that idea of personalization and industry relevance. Um, and so I think we can go deeper on tailoring those messages and real world use cases when we're bringing any kind of a campaign to our clients. Um, I really think that one of the things that stood out that was a learning for us was the value of executive advocacy. So when we had our leaders and experts actively engage with, sharing these insights, as I said earlier, on their social programs, at events on stage, the impact just multiplied. Um, and I think that's kind of one of the strengths of the campaign was the executive advocacy piece. And then lastly, I would probably say the third is around the balance. I think we learned a lot about the balance between that you and I talked about earlier, which is building brand and building demand. Um, I'd love to tighten the connection between content, engagement, and kind of nurturing leads. And I think that is an area where we can always do better. And I'd love to use more data in the next go around. So more insights that helped us be more predictive around what our audiences want to know more from us and from our leaders.
Okay, it's great. It sounds like you've been really successful at loads to build on as well, loads of ideas about to take it forward. So I'm very excited to hear what you got going to enter next year. So it sounds great. Um,
Absolutely.
and also to your point, big shout out to Neil Berry as well. I'm a big fan of Neil. I know what a great work he's doing at Cap Gem, and he's a long-standing friend of B2B marketing. So yeah, big shout
He's a
out.
star. He's a star. Yes, for sure.
So we talked about the campaign. That's really helpful to understand a bit more about that and how what you learned from that. Thinking more generally about thought leadership, it feels again like this is a discipline which is attracting more interest and attention. Do you have any idea? I mean, I appreciate it's easy to talk about Cap Gemini, but you might what you see it might you might see. I'm hoping you might have a perspective on the wider market. Do you have any idea? Do you agree that it's attracting more attention, and do you have a perspective about why that might be? It might be so more important these days.
I mean, I think about what I said earlier around, product-based organizations. Product-based organizations, it's information overload, right? They'll provide you with features and functionality, but we are not a product-based organization, right? We are a services-based, people-based team. And so when you're selling to people, people are buying from you based on trust. And they're not just buying the brand, they're buying from our experts that they trust and they value for their counsel in the industry. And I think it's incumbent on us, and maybe I dare say it's our responsibility in marketing, that people want substance, they want insight, they want proof that you truly understand their challenges. And to your point, I think thought leadership helps us create that currency. Um, there's a lot of information out there. I think it can be overwhelming if you're a decision maker and you see all kinds of things popping up on your social channels, ads and emails and pitches. And to me, Joel, and I don't know if you agree, tell me, but I think thought leadership cuts through that noise because it feels like real value. It's not just sales messaging, it's actually valuable value that someone can take away and either learn from or have a further conversation about.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think it's I think if you love B2B, you love the complexity, but you want to have a vehicle to which to describe that and explain it. And and advertising and all of the channels are brilliant, but and have done well. They're revolutionary, inspirational, but you still have to have something resonant to back it up. And I think that's why it feels like, and as you say, now more than ever, we have this overwhelm of information and content and
Yeah.
different levels of robustness coming at us. So cutting through is important.
Well, and I B2B professional services is not, these are not impulse buys, right? And so I think our buyers, they tend to, or our clients, I should say, they tend to do extensive research before they make a decision. It's a huge, decision that they're making from a financial perspective and a commitment to work with us. And so it's almost like thought leadership can help guide them through that journey, right? So because it kind of positions us from the before, in some cases, before we've even met with them, that they know that we bring expertise to the market in an area that they're interested in before we even have the first meeting. And I think that's the power of it, is it helps them along that buying journey.
Yeah, it's a really great. Thank you. There's great responses there. So we talked about that it's a perhaps in some respects, in my words, an idea whose time has come. It's been there for a while, but it's gaining momentum. But we know that marketing evolves over time. And you talked about personalization in terms of thought leadership. We talked about the role of ABM, which you've been doing for a while. Are there any ways that you can see thought leadership might be evolving, perhaps in terms of channel or technique or format?
I have a I have a bit of a feeling that there's been a shift from long form com long form content, I should say, and multi-format. I think there's more demand for, say, bite-size insights rather than kathunk. Here's, a 100-page piece that we drop on your desk. I think people want that bite-sized insight, uh, content that's a little bit more interactive. Things like what you and I are doing, podcasts and videos and storytelling. I think long form content is maybe yielding more to the multi-format kind of approach when delivering and packaging content. Um, and I think there's a bit of I dare say, a resistance now to things that feel like they're corporately messaged versus what I talked about earlier, advocacy, expert-led advocacy, right? I think audiences want to hear from experts, not just brands, and I think that some of the most successful thought leadership that I've seen feels authored and discussed by the industry experts themselves. It's not the language of a marketing team. A marketing team may very well be behind them, but first and foremost, you hear from the expert and you feel the authenticity coming from that expert-led advocacy.
And you're buying into that individual, and you're buying from the brand and from the company, but also that individual and what they've got to say. So no, I really like that. And I think Kathunk, by the way, is my word of the podcast. That's
Yes.
the Kathunk factor. Um, so we talked about why it's important, why it's valuable, how it's changing, but it's not an easy thing to do, right? It's not something you can, it's not like just sending an email, thought leadership, it's a considered thing to do. So very briefly, what are the challenges? There are lots of challenges associated with it. Which ones kind of stand out to me, the things you've got to consider if you're thinking about doing this or doing more of this?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is making sure that you have a foundation for your thought leadership that is based in data, right? You have to have credible data and research as a baseline for it to be for to even begin the whole process or even begin a piece of thought leadership. So I think gathering the right data, having the teams in place to do the analysis and research, and then you have that data, you have to be able to craft insights, valuable insights that your audiences are going to want to hear about. So I think it has to be insightful and engaging. I think the challenge that I see a lot of companies facing is finding the right expertise as well, right? You need subject matter experts in whether it's the public sector, the automotive industry, the consumer products and retail industries. You need subject matter experts who are going to offer genuine insights and who aren't going to say just regurgitate what they're hearing elsewhere in the media or provide theory. So I think finding the right experts in your organization are really important um, uh, to the thought leadership process. And then lastly, I would say the challenge that a lot of companies face too are probably around quality, right? The quality of what you're putting out there. Is it written well? Does the data hold up? Has it been vetted through credible sources? And is it a source of value to your clients? You really want to not take your eye off the quality of the thought leadership that you're putting out because all that effort you put in behind it can immediately go out the door if it doesn't feel like it's a quality piece of research that you can share with your clients.
I mean, that all sounds really sensible. I guess the shorthand for that is you can't fake it, right? You've got to get it
Can't
right.
fake it.
There's so many ways in which it's important. So,
You're
uh,
right.
great answer, Vito. Just one last question. It's been really enjoyed this conversation. So, if you're a B2B marketer listening to this, you haven't done much thought leadership with your team or with your brand, and maybe you're a technology company or a product-led company where it's perhaps not as baked into what it is that you do. Is there one bit of advice you'd suggest to somebody who's looking to kind of take this on and move this forward in 2025?
I've every time I answer this question, I always think back to Simon Sinek. Start with why. I think if whatever you're doing, you always have to understand the why. What are you trying to achieve with your thought leadership? Why are you doing it? Are you trying to build that trust? Are you trying to showcase your expertise? Are you offering value? Understanding your core purpose is really important to creating something that's valuable and insightful, whether it's to your clients, analysts, journalists, whoever your target audience is. Start with why. Um, I think you heard me say earlier, and I'll reiterate it here, authenticity and expertise. To your point, you said it, don't fake it. I don't think you can fake this. You have to have the chops behind you to be able to provide thought leadership that feels like it's coming from a place of expertise and that people want to hear about, that engages them. Um, and then maybe the last point, Joel, I would say is around think about how you're going to package it. Think about your content strategy. Don't think of it as a campaign, but is it part of a longer term, more holistic effort of what you're trying to say with your audiences or in the marketplace that you're competing in? I think people tend to think about thought leadership or even events as one-offs, major sort of milestones that stand alone. But what I've seen work most is that when you consider it part of a longer term journey, you get more value out of that and you have more impact on your audience.
Yeah, that seems so much so sensible. The power of that over a protracted period of time, the big long idea kind of notion seems really sensible. So,
Absolutely.
Vito, I've all we've got time for now. Thank you so much for your time today. It's really fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
I am so pleased to have been here with you. Thank you, and I hope it's been helpful.
It's been great. Congratulations one more time. Thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed today, there's lots more content like this on the B2B Trust and Influence podcast. Hope you can join us again for another episode very, very soon. Thanks a lot.